Good day and welcome to another online workshop from behavioradvisor.com. Our topic today, figuring out why kids show behaviors that are inappropriate for our settings. While our evaluation of youngsters for possible special education services are typically quite comprehensive, involving medical and psychometric measurements, we're going to look at two ways that give us educators valuable information to bring to the table. One is very well known and prominently used. The other died out in the 1980s like disco music and polyester leisure suits. We'll look at the prominent one only briefly. It is discussed more fully in the Behavior Advisor podcast and pages addressing the practices and procedures of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. The focus today, though, is on resurrecting a valuable assessment procedure that can shed not just light, but enlightenment with regard to a youngster's behavior pattern. I'm talking about the system put forth by Rudolf Driekurs. This eminent professional provided us with a method for gaining a more comprehensive understanding of why individuals act and react as they do. His mistaken goals analysis can give us deeper insight into the purpose, cause, reason, the function behind a behavior pattern. Hi, I'm Tom McIntyre, Dr. Mac as I'm known to most, director of the websites behavioradvisor.com and parentingdoneright.info. Like you, I understand the need to divine the why behind a behavior before we decide on the what to do. Remember when the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland met the young lady perplexed as to which road to take at the fork? He asked, "Where are you going?" She replied, "I don't know." To which he stated, "Then it doesn't matter which road you take." We, on the other hand, do know our destination. We precisely define the behavior that we wish to promote. However, without good information, we are at risk for embarking on the wrong path to that point. This procedure, mistaken goals analysis, will provide us with better directions to the end point. So let's back up the bus and get to the original starting point in student evaluation of behavior. The time when a teacher says, "There you go again! Why do you always?" The educator is then advised by the school's special services team to engage in an ABC analysis. ABC? The proponents of ABC analysis tell us that their formula is the best way to figure out why a behavior is happening. Each of the letters stands for a word. B is for behavior. Whenever we see that action that concerns us, the one that we've defined specifically so we know exactly what we're looking for, once we see that behavior, we say, "There it is." And we look at what came before it, what sparked it, what set it off, what was the preface to that behavior, what event represents the A. And then we pay attention to what followed the behavior, what was the C, the consequence. That consequence will tell us why that behavior keeps happening. Behaviors continue to occur because there's a payoff, there's a benefit. We have to figure out what that payoff is, what the C is in the ABC analysis. Yes, ABC. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. But this ABA procedure only scratches the surface of a behavior. It does identify the superficial reasons for the behavior, but actions aren't always so simply explained. We're going to move now beyond an analysis of superficial actions to what lies beneath them, the psychological drives that often result in observable behavior. So let's move from ABC to D. Driekurs. Rudolf Driekurs investigated the difficulties experienced in forming close relationships, interpersonal bonds, and identified the resultant mistaken goals, errant behaviors that occur when we don't feel like we belong to a group. Those mistaken goals emerge when one does not feel connected to significant others in important life situations. The sense of community, of being valued, of being a contributing member to it. Yes, our greatest human need is to be inextricably intertwined. Yeah, try saying that 8 times fast. Inextricably intertwined to people we view as being important. It is our greatest of human psychological needs to belong. Perhaps many of you are familiar with Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Here we see Maslow's model that explains how it is that we come to be secure or insecure in ourselves. See at the bottom the physiological needs. Once our concerns for physical sustenance, food, water, maintaining an adequate body temperature, once those needs have been met, and we no longer fear for our physical safety, we feel safe from physical harm, then our emotional needs become our focus. It is from our connections with others that our sense of self develops. To become self-actualized, fully developed psychologically, we need membership in a positive community that unswervingly accepts, values, and supports us. To be all that we can be, to borrow an old Army recruitment slogan, we must be a supportive part of and be supported by a group in which we find comfort and strength. We need a soft place to fall after a hard day, a community that takes us in, where we can take the filter off our mouths, say what we truly think, and even if they disagree with us strongly, or even if they are disappointed in us, they still keep us as a member of the group. We are still valued by them. So think about it. Consider the following question. With whom are you interpersonally knotted, so to speak? Who are the members of your support group? Why is it that your group comes together? What's the glue that holds it? For our deeper connections, it's our history together, our positive history together. The camaraderie and the support, the common interests and topics of conversation. Although we can also have communities that form spontaneously with folks that we trust even though we don't know them personally very well. Those of you who ride motorcycles, play chess, teach a certain grade level, listen to jazz, or have another specific hobby or interest, know the instant bond that forms when you meet somebody else with that interest. In my case, I enjoy whitewater kayaking. When the rains come, I go out on the creeks, out onto the rapids, dodging the rocks, going over waterfalls. When I arrive at the put-in, the place where we start, I'm often alone and I wait for others to show up. I don't know these folks, but the moment I see them coming down in their dry suits and with their paddles and with their little whitewater kayaks, there's an instant bond that forms. Why? Well, of course, the common interest, but also our safety depends on each other. If I were to get in trouble, I expect them to come to my aid. They expect the same of me. We keep each other safe. Our lives may depend on each other. And when we meet outside that river scenario, perhaps a kayaker I've never paddled with. I unclipped that velvet rope quickly and I let him in socially. There's that instant connection. So what's the glue that holds your groups together? Those who have their need for belonging met well thrive interpersonally and intrapersonally inside oneself. But if we feel disconnected from others in important life settings, the workplace, the neighborhood, school, home, we react negatively, progressively degenerating if we continue to be excluded from a desirable group or its leadership. Many of our troubling kids are troubled kids. They've been hurt or neglected by important adults, parents, and teachers. They've had adults tell them that they would be protected and nurtured. The adults then failed in their assignments. These kids then developed barbed wire personalities or invisible personalities to fend off or avoid grown-ups and the emotional hurt they inject when they reject. For the rejected, underserved kids, their thinking process is something like this. I've been hurt too many times. I can't take another chance. Take Jacinto, please, as I used to say when he was having his bad days in my class. Here was a kid who had a horrendous life situation. His mother was on drugs and would come back and forth into his life, interspersed between foster home placements. Often the mom brought with her boyfriends who would connect with the child but then leave too. When in my classroom, Jacinto was in a foster home that had promised him that he would be adopted by them. However, they moved and they left him behind. Like a piece of tape repeatedly peeled from the wall, after a while, there's no stickum left. For kids like Jacinto, we have to reapply the emotional sticky stuff, prove ourselves different from others over and over again, pass those repeated tests. Allow me to share an illustrative example. I was conducting a workshop in a secure facility for youth. The youngsters lived in a residence in the facility and attended school there. I could tell at the end of the morning session that this was a place with caring and competent professionals who were making a difference in the lives of kids. During the lunch hour, I struck up a conversation with one of the educators, and she told me about a particular kid, someone she had been working with for a couple of years now. She says, "We are tight. We are close." She even refers to me as Mom. Well, one morning, like every morning, they went out in the garden before school started. It was a chance for the teachers and the kids to be with each other, engaged in a nurturing activity, where they could carry on a conversation, take the emotional temperature of the kids, address issues in a low-pressure situation. So she's saying, we're planting some pansies together, and this girl picks up a brick, tosses it over the high wire fence, and into the windshield of my car. I stood there aghast. How could she do such a thing? We're close. She calls me Mom. We thought about it. We talked about it. We said, it could be that something is happening in this kid's life that is so threatening to her. Something so harsh, so terrible, that she fears even telling you. That you, the one person she can rely on, might reject her, were you to know. I kept in touch with this teacher, got an email from her. She says, just like we talked about, it happened. I reassured her that she could talk with me about anything, and it took some reassurance. But finally she told me, during the weeks, most of the weeks, when she earned points to go home on the weekend, she would live with her mother. This time, her mother had a new boyfriend. the boyfriend entered this girl's room in the evening and committed some sexually inappropriate acts. This child turned that inward. It's my fault. I am the hussy. I am the Lorelei. I brought that upon myself. I must be horrible. And she feared the teacher's rejection were she to tell this. That teacher, again, passed the test by supporting that youngster, by making sure that that would not happen again, legally speaking. Yes, she passed the test. It was a $200 deductible test, but she proved that no matter what you do, that brick through the window to find out if I can still love you and care about you, yes, you can do some awful things, but I am still someone you can trust. This is our model. This is the person we want to emulate. This is a person who's making a big difference in the life of a troubled and troubling kid. Our kids with emotional and behavioral disorders are in such great need of true adult affection and guidance, but they're so afraid of getting rejected again. How do we pass those tests? When told that things will be different with us, this child oftentimes thinks, hey, I've heard that line before. Let's get all the pretense out in the open and speed up the inevitable. You will reject me, just like others have done. And let me prove it. This youngster then engages in a pattern of disrespectful, vile, and despicable acts. And most adults then do reject this youngster. Oh, that kid, there's nothing you can do with them. They treat that kid harshly, thus further strengthening the youngster's perception of grown-ups. Whether we are serving the everyday kid or the badly damaged one, we must heed the words of one of the pioneers in the field of educating children and youth with behavioral challenges. Nicholas Hobbs. He opened up new lines of thought in the field of child psychology, developing new concepts for treating children with emotional problems. Project REED, his program, was an educational approach to the residential treatment of emotionally disturbed children. REED is a systematic approach to working with children and youth who have emotional and behavioral disorders. It focuses on nurturing personal strengths as opposed to centering on disease or weakness in people. And he identified trust as the foundation for accurate assessment of the cause of the aberrant behavior pattern and effective intervention. Because you gotta like the messenger if you're gonna listen to the message. We must sail an often stormy emotional sea before reaching the calm waters. Like that teacher in the secure setting, your interpersonal seamanship is often tested by behavioral gales. To better illustrate how teachers reach kids who have become resistant to adult intervention, I have a keynote speech that I gave at a conference one time about Jacinto, that student who became hardened because of the life circumstances that happened to him. I encourage you to go to that address, read the keynote speech, and please email me and let me know what you think. But to return to our presentation, research, mounds of it, tells us that we are powerful. When we invest ourselves in kids, we reap a harvest of benefits. If you're in a workshop right now, pause the presentation with this image and move into small groups for a brainstorming session. Once many ideas have been forwarded, share those ideas with the larger group before restarting this presentation. Oh, watching this presentation alone? Pause it now and consider the question. Welcome back. I trust that you thought of many great strategies, and here are some that are oftentimes identified in my workshops. First off, create a large history of positive interactions with the youngster. We want to outweigh the negatives so that even in a crisis situation, the youngster sees somebody in front of him or her and they say, I know this person. I know this person has my best interest at heart. I can listen to this person. I can deal with this person. I can work with this person. It's important that we develop an appropriate mindset for working with kids who have behavioral challenges. Something called symptom estrangement. Separate the kid from the behavior. Hate that behavior. Be willing to work with the kid to develop replacement behaviors for the needs and wants that the youngster possesses. Yes, that behavior has to cease and desist, and I will work with you to get rid of it. Perhaps even more important than recognition and praise for a youngster's appropriate actions is stating our belief in the youngster's ability to improve and progress, both academically and behaviorally. Also important is showing non-contingent attention, a $20 term for a $1 idea. I will give you the time of day. I will interact with you pleasantly because you're a human being on this granite planet and you are deserving of an adult's attention. We maintain a calm demeanor. Not an easy task when dealing with kids who oftentimes show us actions that we find to be highly inappropriate, to say the least. When I struggled as a first-year teacher with kids who had severe emotional and behavioral disorders, I had to be reminded by my mentor to keep a calm demeanor. She told me, Tom, you're being tested. These kids are poking around looking for your soft spots. When you say ouch and respond back to them harshly, you are failing the test. You are proving you are like others. I said, well, how do you do this? She gave me a strategy which now falls under the domain of cognitive behavioral therapy. It wasn't called that at that particular time. But she says, when a kid is showing you inappropriate behavior, change how you view that behavior. Instead of saying, out of bounds and I've got to come down hard on it, say, kid in crisis. What does a caring, competent professional do at this moment? Now, oftentimes I was flipping through my mental Rolodex and not finding many ideas, but that's part of becoming the master teacher, is always adding new ideas into our professional bag. How we feel, and thus how we react, depends on how we size up the situation. And when I was sizing up the situation as kid in crisis who needs me right now, I was then able to engage in a helpful approach and use respectful phrasing when speaking with the youngster. How do we develop that sense of team in our classrooms? What is oftentimes recommended is engage the youngsters in cooperative group activities. I tried it, failed miserably. Because I didn't know how to structure those group activities. Now I do. And join me on behavioradvisor.com. Click on the page for cooperative group activities and learn how to structure them so that all kids participate and do so in a productive manner. We allow only supportive comments in the classroom, no put-downs. So when a youngster utters, "That's stupid, you dumb loser," we say that needs to be rephrased within 5 seconds if you wish to remain in this classroom with us. Through our social skills training, this youngster knew very quickly to put the alternative behavior into place. I disagree strongly with your opinion, and let me tell you why. Competition is good. if we're competing against other classrooms or competing against our own performance to improve. And we want to implement a group reward system so that we develop some positive peer pressure. Kids helping us out, saying, "Come on, Henry, knock it off." How do we get them on our side? Go to behavioradvisor.com and click on that page. It's time to conclude Part 1. We will, in Part 2, get very quickly into Driekurs mistaken goals analysis. Mistaken goals have particular relevance to us today for pesky behavior, defiance, violence, and lack of motivation. Thank you for joining me in Part 1. I look forward to speaking with you more in Part 2.